My name is Ruth Combs. My family has farmed the same hollow in Harlan County, Kentucky, for 4 generations. The winter of 1951, a fire took the Blevins family's house clean to the ground. 3 children, January, Black Mountain, no road passable with ice. Grandmother Loretta walked to every door in this holler the next morning. I am told she had her coat on before the sun was up. And by the following afternoon 11 men were on that hillside with plywood and wire and a cast-iron stove, and that family had walls around them before the temperature dropped again. Nobody permitted it. Nobody contracted it out. 2 days. What I want to talk about today is that same idea. The idea that a community can build something real, fast, and cheap enough to actually matter, applied to a crisis that is happening right now in every city in this country. Now, here is a number I want you to sit with before we go any further. On a single night in January of 2025, 745,000 Americans were counted sleeping outside. Not the total number who experienced homelessness that year, just the ones a person with a clipboard found on one specific night in one January census count. The shelters in most cities are full. The wait list for affordable housing in places like Phoenix, Denver, and Columbus stretches months, in some cities, years. And while the committees meet and the grant applications are written in triplicate and the planning commissions schedule their next quarterly session, people are sleeping on concrete. I spent 5 years working as a nurse in Lexington. I know what it looks like when an institution moves at institutional speed toward a problem that is moving faster. And I am going to tell you plainly that pace kills people in January. I have watched it closer to home, too. After the last deep mine in this county closed, I started seeing things in Harlan I had never seen here before. Living tents. Under the Route 119 overpass and along Black Creek, and behind the Dollar General on Cumberland Avenue. Harlan County knows hard times. We have known them for 100 years. But homelessness of this kind, the kind where a man has no structure at all, no door, no floor, no address, that was new. The mine paycheck had insulated this county from that for a long time. Take the paycheck away, and the roof is the next thing to go. Something has to fill that gap. Not next budget cycle. Now. Now, there is an answer that is already working. It is in the ground in Eugene, Oregon, and Walla Walla, Washington, and Athens, Ohio, and it crossed the border last year into British Columbia. And the answer looks, at first glance, like something out of an American history book. A man named Eric Duer, working out of Eugene, asked a question that sounds simple, but that nobody was actually answering. What is the cheapest, most buildable structure you can put up that is genuinely better than a tent, not marginally better, meaningfully better, but does not require a construction crew or a $50,000 budget? He found the answer in the covered wagon, the Conestoga wagon, that arched, rounded shape that carried settlers west in the 1800s. The people who built those wagons were not engineers. They were farmers and blacksmiths who needed something that could be assembled fast, carry a family through hard territory, and keep the rain off. Duer looked at that arch and saw a shelter for right now. He called it the Conestoga Hut, and in terms of what it costs, how fast it builds, and what it actually does for a person sleeping outside, it is one of the most sensible ideas I have seen come out of the homelessness space in 20 years of watching that space as a nurse and as a citizen. Now here is what the hut actually is. Picture a structure 6 feet wide and 10 feet long. The walls on both ends are solid, insulated panels. The floor is a raised platform with insulation underneath. You are not sleeping on the ground or on cold concrete. The roof is a curve made from livestock fencing wire, the same kind I have coiled on a spool in my barn right now, bent into that Conestoga arch and layered over with insulation and heavy-duty outdoor vinyl. The front wall has a lockable door and a window. Inside, a raised platform bed, room for your belongings, 60 square feet of total living space. Now that is small. I am not going to tell you it is not small. It is smaller than most bathrooms, but I want you to understand what 60 square feet with a locked door actually does for a person who has been sleeping on a sidewalk. If you have been living outside, your whole nervous system is running in emergency mode every night. You are worrying about who is going to walk up on you while you are asleep. You are worrying about the bag that has your ID, your medications, your Social Security card, every document you need to apply for housing or a job. Your brain cannot think past tonight because tonight is not safe. A locked door changes that equation, not because the hut is large, because the threat is gone. I understand this from nursing. The human brain under chronic stress, the kind that comes from sleeping outside without safety, night after night, produces cortisol at a level that suppresses the prefrontal cortex. That is the region responsible for planning, for decision-making, for imagining a future beyond the next hour. Research from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, published in 2020, found that stable shelter, even minimal stable shelter, measurably reduces stress hormone levels and restores decision-making capacity within weeks of placement, not months, weeks. That is not philosophy, that is biology. Give someone a locked door and an insulated floor, and their brain comes back online. They start keeping appointments, they start looking for work, they start thinking about what comes next instead of just surviving tonight. Now, here is the part that makes this buildable by real communities in real places with actual budgets. 2 people can construct one of these huts in about 8 hours. The materials are things you can buy at any farm supply or hardware store: plywood, lumber, livestock fencing wire, insulation, vinyl sheeting, and screws. With recycled and donated materials, the cost runs between $250 and $500. Even buying everything brand new, you are looking at around $2,500. Compare that to a tiny home which runs between $10,000 and $20,000, takes weeks to build, requires permits, skilled labor, and a permanent foundation. Compare it to a unit of affordable housing, which cost an average of over $300,000 per door to construct in American cities in 2023. 2 people, 8 hours, $500. That is not an approximation, that is the number. Now, the hut by itself is not the whole story. Eric Duer's organization, Community Supported Shelters, places these huts in what they call safe spot communities. Small clusters of 3 to 18 huts set up on parking lots behind churches, on land donated by local nonprofits and businesses. Spaces that exist in every city in America and sit empty overnight. Each community has shared amenities, portable toilets, a kitchen area, phone charging stations, running water access. Some sites have garden beds that residents plant and maintain themselves, and I want to say something about that detail because it matters. A person tending a garden bed is a person with something to tend to, something growing, something to come back to. That is not a small thing. There are rules: no drugs on site, no alcohol, no violence. Residents check in at night and leave during the day to pursue work, services, or treatment. The initial stay is 30 days, extendable to 10 months if someone is actively working toward permanent housing. Regular check-ins are required. Shared maintenance responsibilities. 3 written violations and you are out. This is not a place to disappear, it is a place to stabilize. The waiting lists at these sites in Eugene run 60 to 70 days long. People are lining up, genuinely competing, for a 6 by 10 structure with no indoor plumbing. That fact alone tells you everything you need to know about the alternatives those people are choosing between. Walk through one of these communities in Eugene, and it looks nothing like what most people picture when they hear the words tent city. Neat rows of arched huts, a communal kitchen tent, power strips at a shared table where people charge phones during the day, garden beds along the fence, quiet, orderly. It looks like someone sat down and thought seriously about how to do this right. In November of 2025, Athens, Ohio, after hearings that got heated, after concerns about property values and zoning and neighborhood character, voted unanimously to approve a pilot of 3 huts behind a church on North Congress Street. Unanimous. A city council agreeing that 3 insulated structures in a parking lot behind a fence is an acceptable response to people sleeping in 20-degree weather. The first resident moved in that same weekend. That speed, idea to approval to a person sleeping safely in a matter of days, is the part that separates this from almost everything else in the homelessness space. Now, I want to stop here and say something I have not heard anyone else in this conversation say. This is not a new idea, not in its bones. The capacity of a community to build something fast, simple, and useful for its most vulnerable members, that is as old as any hollow in these mountains. I grew up watching it. I grew up inside it. I remember standing in Loretta's root cellar when I was about 6 years old, watching her take jars down from the second shelf, her elderflower, her yarrow, her dried boneset, and she said something I did not fully understand until years later. She said, "Ruth, a woman who knows what to do in a hard moment does not have to wait for someone to tell her she can do it." She was not talking only about medicine. She was talking about a posture toward the world. The posture of someone who has knowledge, who has tools, who sees a need, and who acts, without waiting for an authority to grant permission. The communities in Eugene and Athens and Walla Walla did not wait for federal housing policy to catch up with reality. They found empty land. They built structures that cost $500. They created the rules that made those structures livable for real human beings. And they moved faster than any institution was capable of moving. Now let me tell you about the people who have actually lived in these huts, because that is the part that matters most. A man named Jeff Howard moved into a Conestoga Hut in Eugene with nothing. He used the stability, the floor, the locked door, the guaranteed place to sleep, to start over. He got a job. He got an apartment. He said the thing that changed everything was not the hut itself. It was the fact that he could finally stop surviving and start planning. The hut gave him the cognitive room to think past tonight. A veteran named James Clapp was living in a hut village built specifically for former service members. He told reporters the huts pretty much saved his life. Before moving in, he had nowhere safe to keep his documents, no mental space to think beyond the next meal. The floor under his feet gave him enough ground to start looking for work. A woman named Tracy Joslin used to give tours of her hut in Eugene with obvious pride. That detail has stayed with me. Pride. In 60 square feet. Because it was hers and it was safe and she had made it into something. The pattern keeps repeating. Give a person a locked door and their nervous system comes down off the ceiling. They start showing up to appointments. They start applying for jobs. They start being able to imagine what next month looks like. Now let me be honest about what this does not do, because I will not let you walk away thinking this is a solution to homelessness. It is not. A Conestoga hut has no plumbing. It has no built-in heat. The design relies on insulation trapping body heat inside the structure, which on a 20-degree night keeps a person significantly warmer than a tent, but it is not a heated room. 60 square feet is not somewhere any adult human should live long term. And the critics who ask whether cities might get comfortable handing people huts and slow the effort to build actual permanent affordable housing, they are raising a fair concern. That risk is real. The people running these programs say so themselves. Ginger Schmallenberg, who directs the Gathering Place in Athens, was direct about it. These huts exist so that a person waiting on a housing voucher is not dead by February while they wait. The voucher still has to come. The apartments still have to be built. Use this for what it is, a bridge, not a destination. Now here's the part I want to say plainly, because my background as a nurse does not let me look at this picture without asking the obvious question. Why is it that a structure costing $500, buildable in 8 hours by 2 people with a downloadable instruction manual, is not the default first response to homelessness in every American city? I am not going to tell you anyone is hiding it. Nobody hid it. But I will tell you how the money flows. There is no profit in a shelter that costs $500 and can be built by volunteers. There is no licensing fee. There is no materials contract. There is no architectural firm billing hourly to design the same arch that covered wagon builders figured out in 1800. The systems that receive government contracts to address homelessness receive those contracts based on the scale and complexity of their proposed programs. A simple, cheap, community-built structure does not score well in a grant application compared to a 5-year supportive housing development with a 7-figure budget and an institutional partner on the letterhead. I watched the same pattern in healthcare. The treatments with a complex delivery system and a significant price point get the research dollars, the journal articles, the sales teams. The things that are cheap and simple and that any competent community can administer, those require a different kind of champion. Eric Duer built this model so it would not require a champion. He made the construction manuals available to anyone. He made the design replicable on purpose, deliberately, consciously, because an idea that lives inside one organization in one city is fragile. An idea that a church group in Ohio or a Rotary Club in Washington or a farm family in Kentucky can act on by next Saturday, that has legs. They did not hide it. They just never had an advertising budget, and Quiet does not run a commercial, so a whole generation of communities grew up not knowing they had this option. That is not a conspiracy. It is just how the money flows. My grandmother Loretta did not know any of that. She only knew that when the Blevins family's house burned in January of 1951, you did not hold a committee meeting. You walked up the hill with lumber and wire, and you built something that could keep a family alive until things got better. That is the permission structure this moment requires, not a grant, not a feasibility study. The decision made by people who live in a community and can see a need to act this week instead of waiting for someone else to act. One more thing before I close, and I want to be specific, because this matters most in the cold months. These huts are insulated, walls, floor, and roof, and that insulation traps body heat inside the structure. On a night that drops to 25 degrees, a Conestoga hut creates a meaningfully different environment than a tent. You can freeze to death in a tent. In Kentucky, in Ohio, in any state with a real winter, we know what January does to a body with nothing between it and the wind. I have treated hypothermia. I know what cold does. You are unlikely to freeze in a well-insulated Conestoga hut with appropriate bedding. That is not a complete answer to anything. But it is the difference between someone being alive in February and not being alive at all. And right now, that is the difference that matters most. So here is what I want you to do. 1. Go to the Community Supported Shelters website and look at their construction manual. You do not have to buy it today. Just look at it. See what two people could actually build in one weekend with basic tools and materials from a hardware store. 2. Identify one piece of empty land in your community, a church parking lot, a nonprofit side yard, a business lot that sits empty overnight, and have one conversation with whoever owns it. Just one conversation. You are not asking for a commitment. You are planting a seed. 3. Call or email your city council member and ask one specific question. What does your current ordinance say about temporary structures, and what would it take to change it if it needs changing? Eugene, Oregon changed theirs. Athens, Ohio changed theirs. Both places have real neighborhoods and real politics, and both found a path. 4. If you cannot build anything this weekend, find the organization in your community that serves people who are unhoused, a shelter, a meal program, a day center, and ask what they need most this month. Socks, tarps, phone chargers, a blanket. The gap between nothing and something starts with that call. 5. Share this with someone who sits on a church board, a city planning commission, a Rotary Club, or a neighborhood association. These huts are being built right now by people exactly like that. The idea just needs to reach them. Until then, print out those construction plans, find one willing person, and sit down together and talk about what the two of you could build by Saturday. Tell me in the comments, is there a church parking lot, an empty lot, a piece of unused land in your town that could hold 3 of these? Tell me where you are and what you see when you look around. Because the women who kept this country alive through hard winters and harder years knew things we are only just beginning to remember. Don't let it die with a generation.